Rome loved power, and crowds loved watching women break even more. In public, law and gossip teamed up. Hair got shaved, veils ripped, names stamped infamous, and families ruined by one accusation. Think about a city where shame counted as entertainment. Today, I will show you 20 Roman shaming rituals for women that went beyond pain, and what secrets still sit. Let's start with number 20. Damnatio ad bestias. The arena roars and people lean forward for fun. Then the gate opens, and you see who the fun targets. Romans called it damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, and courts saved it for people stamped as the worst, like runaway slaves, enemies of the state, and later some Christians. That label did the damage first, because once a court picked you for this, the city treated you as lower than human, and the crowd followed that script without thinking twice. Vendors shouted, spectators arrived early, and animals roared under the floor. She walked out in a thin tunic, sometimes almost naked, because public shame mattered as much as death. Seneca and Martial described bodies tied to stakes, then torn apart by bears, leopards, or lions while the crowd laughed. And that laugh told everyone watching that mercy had no place here. After condemnation, legal rights vanished, property moved to the state, and family reputation collapsed. Even burial could turn complicated, so the killing acted like the final stamp on a long humiliation. Keep watching, because Rome had a punishment with no end. Here comes number 19. Public infamia declaration. A judge speaks, and the room stays calm. Then you realize one word can ruin an entire life. Roman law used infamia as social death on paper. A magistrate or court decision labeled someone infamous, and she dropped out of respectable society in one hit. Adulteresses, registered prostitutes, actresses, and some freedwomen carried this stain, and once it landed, the city treated her as fair game. After a public declaration, she lost the right to testify in court, struggled to marry a respectable citizen, and absorbed insults in the street. The ugly part sat in one idea: honor removed. Roman jurists treated honor like a shield, and infamia pulled that shield away. So even a normal trip to the forum turned into a daily punishment made of stares and open disrespect. This label did not fade in Roman writing. Once her name appeared on lists or court records, infamous followed her at the market, at festivals, and even inside her extended family. Rumors could start it, and the label could lock it in place. Now see how Rome carved shame into official records. Let's move to number 18. Nota censoria in the forum. Imagine hearing your family named in the forum. Now imagine the state adds a mark beside it. Rome's censors ran the moral scoreboard. During the census, they reviewed citizens and could place a nota censoria, a censor's mark, beside people who offended public morals. For men, it could mean demotion to a lower tribe or expulsion from the Senate. For families tied to scandalous women, it meant public, lasting embarrassment. Censors read decisions aloud, and that turned the forum into a stage. When a household got flagged for adultery, prostitution, or shameless behavior, neighbors remembered it because the state made it unforgettable. The mark hit husbands and fathers too, and that pressure snapped back into the home, because men carried the public hit and often blamed the woman tied to the scandal. Roman moralists loved this tool because it punished and warned at the same time. Every censor list acted like a legal gossip sheet, and even if she stayed silent, the mark spoke for her. Shopkeepers served differently. Matrons kept distance at rites, and suitors avoided daughters. Paper shame soon turned into street shame. Watch what happens outdoors. Next one is number 17. Adulterous wife's procession. Want to know how Rome taught fear fast? They turned a walk home into a sentence. Under the Lex Julia de Adulteris from 18 to 17 BCE, a husband had a legal duty to divorce an adulterous wife and could bring charges within strict deadlines. Penalties included loss of property and banishment, yet Rome also loved a visible lesson. A disgraced woman moving through public space while eyes tracked every step. Writers describe husbands parading adulterous wives past doorways and through courtyards, sometimes with clothing torn or swapped for something plain and humiliating. Details shift from story to story, yet the point stays firm. Everyone must see what happened. Why push it into the street? Because neighbors whispered from windows, pointed in silence, and children learned the rule early, long before they understood law. Because once she reached home, humiliation could get even more personal. If this is hitting you already, give this video some hype right now. Hit like and subscribe, because this series goes way darker and way stranger from here. Drop a comment with the one ritual you think would break a person fastest, because the next entry flips a private mistake into a public parade. Let's move to number 16. Head shaving of the adulteress. Hair sounds harmless until someone steals it in public. Then your head becomes the story everyone reads. In Roman culture, a respectable matron wore carefully arranged hair and often a veil. Poets and jurists treated hair as visible honor, a sign of modesty and status. So when a husband shaved an adulterous wife, he removed that symbol on purpose. Later, Roman and early Christian sources described the adulteress with a shorn head as a walking warning sign, and that warning followed her everywhere. Hair grows back, yet reputation rarely heals the same way. Every time she stepped outside, people read the bare head like a confession. The deeper cut came from what the look signaled in Rome. Slaves, criminals, and defeated enemies often carried this look, so a freeborn woman suddenly wore a style linked to people Rome trained itself to disrespect. Religious life turned harsher too. In a world where modest hair signaled piety, temple visits turned into a spotlight moment, and the crowd already knew what to think. And once Rome marked the head, the body often came next. Here comes number 15. Stripping at the husband's doorway. A front door should protect you. In Rome, the doorway could betray you. The Roman ianua, the front door, marked the boundary between family life and public life. Some literary sources show a husband dragging an accused wife to that threshold, tearing away fine clothing and leaving her exposed for relatives, clients, and passers-by to judge. The cruelty sat in the setting. The doorstep turned into a courtroom where she had no real voice. He could pull off jewelry, rip expensive fabric, and leave her in a basic tunic or even less. For a Roman matron, clothing signaled rank, so every layer removed signaled a fall. People who once greeted her as domina now watched like strangers at a show. And that shift mattered because Rome ran on public reputation. This doorway exposure announced something colder. The household no longer protected her. Rome built identity on family honor, and here the family delivered the blow right where everyone could see it. Then money entered the scene, and money could be punished quietly. Let's move to number 14. Dowry confiscation ceremony. Want to watch a future disappear in minutes? Watch servants carry it out while witnesses count. Roman marriage worked like a business deal as much as romance. A wife brought a dowry, land, money, or goods meant to support the household. Under Augustus, when courts or family councils condemned her for adultery, the husband could keep a large share of that dowry and even seize part of her personal property. That hit mattered because it removed options. Enforcement rarely stayed quiet. Relatives gathered, witnesses stood nearby, scribes recorded items, and servants carried trunks, strongboxes, and furniture piece by piece while she stood there. Each chest leaving meant fewer choices later, fewer safe places, fewer ways to rebuild. The neighborhood learned the lesson too. Guilt could cost you everything you brought into the marriage. The ceremony signaled power in public. Money moved to his side, shame stayed on hers. Even if exile came later, people remembered the day her dowry marched out, and friends weighed whether helping her might pull scandal onto them. After money left, Rome often removed the person as well. Next one is number 13, public relegation ritual. Exile sounds like a legal term until you reach the docks. Then every step feels like a public goodbye. Under the Lex Julia de Adulteris, the standard punishment for a convicted adulteress included relegatio ad insulam, relegation to an island. She lost half her dowry and a third of her property. Then authorities sent her to a distant place like Panditeria, separate from her partner. That separation mattered because it isolated her and controlled the story. Even Augustus applied this penalty to Julia the Elder after her public affairs. Sources describe her sailing away under guard, forbidden from wine and male company, watched by officials who reported back to Rome. That detail shows control, not simple distance. The voyage itself acted like slow punishment. Each mile of coastline sliding away meant fewer allies, fewer voices, fewer chances to rebuild. This counted as relegation, not total loss of citizenship. Yet the social effect was still crushed. Friends who walked with her to the docks made a public statement, and friends who stayed away made another statement just as loud. Once Rome pushed her away, the city still punished her at home. Let's move to number 12. Exclusion at the temple gates. Public shame already cuts deep. Now imagine shame aimed at your connection to the gods. Roman religion tied honor to ritual access. Certain disgraceful groups, including some convicted adulteresses, prostitutes, and actresses, faced strong restrictions on entering major temples or joining official rites. So imagine walking up to a festival you once belonged to, then guards stop you at the steps, and nobody needs to shout, because the silent block says everything. Standing outside while other women carried offerings hit identity hard. Festivals meant community visibility, shared meals, and status, so exclusion told everyone that the gods, or at least the city, wanted distance from you. Priests and magistrates enforced these rules in full view, and people nearby filled the quiet with whispers, because blocked temple steps create instant stories. In a culture obsessed with pudicitia, female modesty, and chastity, losing religious standing shredded one of the last safe roles a disgraced woman could hold. Even if she stayed alive, she stood outside the place that once signaled respectable. And once that respect vanished, Rome had a label that could crush everything. Here comes number 11, branding as a meritrix. One word can change how strangers treat you. In Rome, that word could become your cage. In Roman law, a registered meritrix fell into the category of infamous. She had to register with the aediles, pay taxes, and accept a permanent drop in status. Some sources describe owners branding enslaved prostitutes or forcing them to wear specific clothing or hairstyles that marked them as sexually available and socially polluted. Even when the mark stayed social instead of physical, the effect stayed brutal. For a disgraced woman, being classed with meretrices could feel like a second sentence. The legal effect mattered because she could not contract a legal marriage with a citizen, struggled to protect future children's status, and faced a world where punishment came easier and protection came slower. Roman satirists loved the contrast. One day she wore the stola and veil. Then rumors placed her in cheap clothing on the wrong side of town. Anger plus gossip blurred the line between adulteress and professional outcast, and once law and rumor agreed, the stain deepened fast. That leads straight into a public gesture that ripped status away instantly. Let's move to number 10. Veil stripping of the matron. A veil can act like a passport in Rome. So what happens when someone rips it off? The stola and veil marked the Roman matron like a uniform. Moralists treated the covered head as a sign of chastity and obedience, so when a husband or magistrate tore off that veil in public, the message landed hard. She lost the right to matronal honor. One tug could change how the whole street treated her. Writers hint that prostitutes and lower-status women could not wear the same veils as respectable wives, so veil stripping pushed a disgraced wife closer to the meritrix category without changing the legal file. Neighbors saw a bare head in the forum or at a festival and understood something broke inside that household, and people loved reading private chaos on a public body. This act embarrassed male relatives too. An unveiled head suggested the men failed to control the household, and that shame spread across the family name. Every relative who passed her carried part of the story, and Rome ran on stories that never stayed quiet. Once clothing signals vanished, Rome often demanded words in public. Here comes number 9. Forced oath of chastity. Now Rome targets your voice. One oath could trap you for years. Romans believed the gods listened to oaths. In some adultery scandals, a woman faced pressure to take a public oath of chastity, promising before witnesses, and sometimes before a deity, that she remained faithful. Refusal looked like admission. Agreement risked divine revenge if she lied. Either choice carried danger, and the crowd loved watching that pressure land. A matron under suspicion could step forward, touch an altar or sacred object, and declare innocence. If any later detail contradicted her statement, social fallout hit harder than a simple confession, because now people talked about perjury before the gods, a double betrayal in their minds. Even when she spoke the truth, enemies could twist the moment. Whispered doubts followed her into the market, into family dinners, and into festivals, and every sideways glance acted like a verdict people kept rewriting. The oath meant to clean her name could lock her inside suspicion. When words failed, Rome returned to visual humiliation they trusted more. Let's move to number 8. Parade in a slave's tunic. Status can drop faster than you can blink. All it takes is the wrong outfit in the right crowd. In Rome, clothing acted like portable rank. A slave's tunic sat shorter, rougher, and plainer than a matron's layered clothing. So forcing a disgraced woman into that tunic and walking her through public spaces sent a brutal message. Her honor dropped to slave level in front of everyone. Satirists and moralists described wives who dressed above their station or acted promiscuously, and punishing them with low-status clothing reversed that image in the sharpest way. Onlookers needed no announcement. The fabric explained everything. The crowd saw it, then adjusted their behavior, because Rome trained people to read clothing like evidence. This parade could stack with other humiliations, like head shaving and veil removal, and together it created a full public downgrade. Even when she stayed legally free, strangers treated her like someone born for obedience, not respect, and that social shift opened the door to harsher treatment. Once a crowd sees you as less, pain becomes easier to sell. Next one is number 7. Marketplace whipping of the wife. A marketplace has noise, deals, and arguments. Then a whip cracks and everyone freezes. Public whipping appears across Roman history as punishment for slaves, lower-class offenders, and sometimes disgraced free people. When a husband or magistrate ordered a wife flogged in a market or open square, an internal household issue turned into a public show. Legal sources mention husbands' authority to discipline wives in earlier periods, and later accounts and Christian-era laws also show harsh physical punishment of women. The marketplace mattered because it gathered every social level: merchants, freedmen, visitors, and other matrons. Each stroke punished her body and warned every woman within earshot about boundaries the system expected them to follow. The crowd learned fast, because fear travels faster when it plays out in public. Afterward, bruises stayed where cloth could not fully hide them. Each mark said the system allowed this, and that message sat on her skin like proof. Once Rome marked a woman that way, people treated her like scenery, someone to stare at, judge, and move past. Then Rome moved the humiliation to the steps of law itself. Let's move to number 6. Exposure on the basilica steps. A courthouse already pulls eyes from every direction. Now imagine standing there while strangers trade your story. The basilica served as Rome's legal and commercial hub. Being placed or forced to wait on its steps after a moral scandal turned a body into a signboard for the case. Even without an official sentence carved into stone, people noticed who lingered there: debtors, petitioners, offenders, and sometimes disgraced women waiting for judgments on adultery or divorce. Her presence said private trouble had turned into public legal danger, and once the city smelled scandal, it spread through conversations that sounded casual but cut deep. Lawyers, clients, and onlookers swapped details while doing business, because gossip moved best where everyone had to gather anyway. For Roman women, whose ideal life stayed mostly indoors, forced exposure in that central space hit hard. The city watched on the very threshold where honor and dishonor received official stamps, and that made the shame feel official even before any final decision. When the legal side finished, the body often faced removal from the city itself. Here comes number 5. Banishment beyond the city gates. Rome had walls for a reason. Cross the gates and belonging breaks. Banishment separated her from the sacred boundary of Rome. Officials escorted her beyond the city gates, and that crossing told everyone she no longer belonged inside the community's protective circle. Even when her destination sat close, the message stayed loud. She lived outside the circle now. Friends faced a painful choice: walk with her and share suspicion, or stay back and protect a clean name. Every step toward the walls turned into a farewell to familiar streets, markets, and temples. Even silence spoke, because absence became a public statement in a city obsessed with reputation. Exile rewired her social life fast. People who visited risked association with a woman condemned for moral failure. Letters started with apologies and ended with careful wording in case authorities read them. Her world shrank through constant calculation. Who still dared to be seen with her? Once Rome pushed her out physically, families at home still signaled they accepted the verdict. Next one is number 4. Marriage bed evidence display. Some objects should stay private forever. Rome dragged them into daylight, starting with the bed. For Romans, the marriage bed symbolized legitimate sex, children, and household honor. In some adultery scandals, families displayed signs of betrayal: letters, gifts, or even bedding at or near the doorway. Legal writings stressed the marriage bed as defiled and allowed fathers or husbands to prosecute on that basis. And that legal framing turned private items into public proof. Turning that symbol outward crushed privacy. Neighbors passed, glanced, and whispered about what happened on it. And once a street starts imagining your private life, you lose control of your own story. Relatives visiting the house could not ignore the scene because the exhibit sat where everyone had to look. Even after the bed returned inside, the memory stayed outside. Every time she saw it again, she knew the neighborhood pictured her there in the worst way they could imagine. The house itself began to feel marked, like a scandal gained an address. Then the doorway turned into a billboard, and the family posted the story. Let's move to number 3. Household doorpost shaming. A door usually greets guests. In Rome, a door could accuse you before you spoke. Romans used doorposts for messages, victory trophies, devotional plaques, and wreaths for celebrations. Turning that same space into a bulletin board for disgrace fits their obsession with public reputation. References to written notices and proclaimed accusations suggest families sometimes announced moral failures at the threshold, especially when law required husbands to act against adulterous wives. A notice could name her, describe the offense, or declare the divorce. Even without long text, symbols or damaged clothing pinned there could say enough. Visitors stopped asking questions because the doorway answered for them. The home turned into a monument to failure, and that kind of public marking spread beyond one person fast. Potential suitors hesitated before connecting their family to that address. Business partners weighed whether scandal might stain their dealings. Children grew up under a constant reminder that one person's choices shifted the household's standing. Once a family posted the story on the house, some Romans wanted the state to finish the job in the arena. Next one is number 2. Arena display before execution. Executions could act like warm-up entertainment in Rome. Imagine realizing you are the opening act. Roman games mixed gladiator fights, animal hunts, and public executions. A condemned woman could appear in the arena as part of elaborate myth-based shows before death, sometimes forced to play roles like Europa or Dirce while animals or machinery destroyed her. Spectacle writers recorded scenes where women stripped and bound became props in cruel reenactments. And that detail shows the goal: humiliation plus spectacle. The crowd read her as a criminal and character at the same time. People cheered, joked, and placed bets, treating her last moments like background noise before the starfighters entered. That reaction mattered because it shows how public punishment trained spectators to treat a person as an object. This display erased individuality. Her name blended into lists of victims, and what stayed in memory were images of bodies staged for maximum effect, chained, exposed, and used as part of the show. Yet some women lost everything even before a public sentence reached the arena. And the last is number 1, family council condemnation. Forget the stadium for a moment. A living room full of relatives could decide your fate. In early and Republican Rome, the pater familias, the male head of household, held immense power. For serious offenses like adultery, tradition allowed a concilium domesticum, a family council. Male kin gathered, heard accusations, and advised the pater on punishment. Sources describe fathers killing daughters caught in adultery, and husbands acting with lethal force after such counsels, and that detail shows how deadly family judgment could become. Even when the outcome stopped short of death, the process was crushed. She faced relatives she grew up with, listened as they weighed her worth, and understood their verdict shaped everything: divorce, exile, loss of dowry, and her place in family memory. No neutral courtroom existed here. The same people who once celebrated her wedding now debated whether she deserved protection. Their decision echoed for generations in how grandchildren heard her story, because family memory repeated one version until it hardened into truth. And once shame began at home, Rome gave few paths back. If any of these Roman punishments shocked you, tell me which one hit hardest in the comments. Eyes on the screen, tap the next video, and let's keep digging.